You are listening to Exploring Sacred with your host, Denise Iwana Francisco, on the Temple Within Radio and Digital Media Network, giving voice to the sacred.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first day of spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. Welcome to a brand new day in your life, an opportunity to begin again, an opportunity to continue doing what it is that you've been doing, keeping on. It's a brand new day. It's a time of the year. It's one of those seasons that says, well, what about all things new? And what about all things old? And what out of the old do we bring into the new? Welcome to spring. This morning on Exploring Sacred, we're going to be talking about the mystics of old. And the fact that actually the mystics of old are here and now. And one of my very favorite subjects to talk about. And I invite each and every one of you into the chat room here at Spreaker. And I will go ahead and post that right in the Exploring Sacred page. So if you are there on Facebook tuning in this morning, if you hop on over to the Exploring Sacred page, you will see the chat room link. All right. So I invite everybody to take a great big deep breath as we welcome spring and all that spring heralds. And here we are also celebrating a magnificent super moon. Talk about powerful energies. Last night I was having a text dialogue with my cousin Julie about the potency of the moon and how some of the signs of the zodiac, particularly water signs, are very much influenced by the passion of the moon, by the reflection of the moon, and the wisdom of the moon and what the moon has to offer us. That's how a mystic looks at things. And what is a mystic? A mystic is the one who's interested in, intrigued by, and drawn to understanding the mystery of life, the mystery of the hidden, the mystery of the unseen, the mystery of the not yet revealed. And yet to the mystic, all of those things that are unseen, not yet revealed, or hidden are very real in their lives, in their psyche, in their emotions, in their soul's journey. The mystic understands that there's more going on in life than what meets the physical eye. And every one of us has an opportunity to be to a greater or lesser degree, a mystic, a modern day mystic, wanting to know, but what's it really all about? And what is my relationship to the unseen world? Speaking of a modern day mystic, good morning, Janet. Oh, you're in Wales today. Another one of my very favorite places where you and I met face to face years ago there in Portmeirion. I keep Portmeirion dishware here in my home to remind me of that time. And talk about a mystical place. As a person myself who is Welsh and Scottish and Irish and all of that good kind of things and the mix-up of who I am, Wales is particularly mystical, as is Scotland, as is Ireland, as are so many places around Grandmother, because you see, the mystics come from all four corners, as they say, of Grandmother Earth. Mystics exist in all cultures, in all spiritual pathways, religious corridors or not. They are there. There are always those that want to understand more than the obvious. And there are many words that we ascribe to those people, and some of them actually terrify the person perhaps who is uneducated. The word occult, boy, that really draws up some hackles for some people, isn't it? Occult is hidden. It means the hidden teachings. As does Gnostic, right? Gnosticism, hidden wisdom teachings. those that aren't right there for everyone to see, for the masses to see. Growing up, as a Catholic kid, I learned a long, long time ago about the saints, the mystical saints. Padre Pio, Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Lisieux, Bernadette. The list goes on and on and on and on of the mystical saints. And I used to think to myself, gee, it must have been really special to be one of those people way, way back long, long time ago. Except for in the case of Padre Pio, who is a modern day saint and mystic. What about Francis of Assisi? What about Siddhartha the Buddha? What about? And I used to sit and think to myself, but where did they go? Where did they all go? And as I grew up and started to begin to understand my own gifts and my own charismatic expressions of spirit, as they say at Catechism, I came to understand that the mystics of old didn't go anywhere permanently. There was a time where they went underground, where they were hidden for fear of punishment. And why were they punished? Well, there's something about the mystic that really rattles the cages of many, because the mystic asks questions. And some of the questions that the mystic asks are uncomfortable for those who are comfortable with the status quo. Those that are okay with, well, this is what I heard on Sunday morning. This is what I heard Saturday evening. This is what I heard at the community gathering. And that's good enough for me. The mystic says, but what about? What about those hidden corridors that only the priest knows about, that only the rabbi knows about, that only the imam knows about, or the medicine person, or the shaman? What about those corridors? I want to travel there as well, and I want to know what it is that they know. What it is that they know, and they then interpret for all of us in the masses. I'd like to experience that for myself. Well, that got a whole lot of mystics into a whole lot of trouble. And, for some of them, they were punished. Some of them, their lives were taken for their thirst for the hidden knowledge, for the gnosis, for the occult, the hermetic knowledge. So underground they went for a great good long time. I remember being in France at the Cathar stronghold at Montségur, and being way up, it felt like on the top of the world in what became a prison for the Cathar sect of mystics, running for their lives for fear of being burned alive or stoned alive, or several other really very hideous endings to their lives, for simply being curious and wanting to have a one-on-one experience of Creator for themselves, not through the eyes or the lens of, or the teachings of another. Good morning, Angie. I'm going to let Dominic in, speaking of saints, because Gabriel and Dominic go through this dance every week, where Gabriel's in the studio with me and Dominic just has to come in and poke at him a little bit. And even in the names of Gabriel and Dominic, it was, they say, the Archangel Saint Gabriel who appeared to Father Dominic long, long time ago, they say. And thus began the journey and the evolution of the Rosary. That's the tale, the story that some relay about the beginnings, the origins of the rosaries. The saint known as Dominic, the friar or the father of the Dominican order. Here in Grand Rapids, I'm very fond of the Dominican sisters, as most of you know. And they're really an extraordinary group of mystical women, open-hearted women. And so even purposefully naming my dogs and my cats and listening to what they wanted to be named. But back to the subject. Hey, good morning, Rob. Being above ground and accepted made them open to manipulation, yes. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, an amazing mystic, Bernard of Clairvaux. One of the authors of probably one of the very first written books about mysticism, about metaphysics, Bernard of Clairvaux, St. John of the Cross, talking about the dark night of the soul. And for a long time, they did have to go underground, and the ways of teaching evolved into tools that we now know, some say, as the tarot. Ways of passing along the hidden knowledge. You only have to look at the works of the likes of Da Vinci and Michelangelo and others to realize there were lots of hidden teachings, occult teachings, esoteric teachings, hermetic teachings contained within their art, that for those with eyes to see would understand what's going on even in the paintings or in some of the writings of Bacon and Shakespeare and John Dee and on and on and on. Years ago, speaking of the Dominican Center and the Dominican sisters, actually my spiritual director, Charmaine, is not a nun, but she is a Dominican spiritual director, and she said to me, you know, the mystics of old didn't go away, Denise. They're back. They are among us. They didn't die off with the likes of Catherine of Siena or Teresa of Lisieux, but they're back. And they're a little more cautious, perhaps, because of those times in our human history. But they are alive, they are well. We call them by different names. We call them medicine men, medicine people, shamans, right? All sorts of names to describe the one who wishes to see and to understand and experience a one-on-one relationship or walk with spirit. Yeah, exactly. That is the truth, Rob. He did. Yeah, Dominic is not without his faults. That is for sure. Yeah, and neither is Bernard. They were humans. You know, the saints, what we tend to forget about is the way that some people are sainted, right? That's a whole other show, isn't it, about how someone becomes a saint, because we're all human. We're all walking this human life, and even if we have been sainted or looked upon as a saint, the truth of the matter is every one of us is human, and we've come here to experience being human, fully human, and that doesn't mean that we're going to walk perhaps the straightest of pathways or the most pristine of pathways in our humanness and our experience of shadow and light, darkness and brilliance. The mystics of old, oftentimes we find, were cloistered. They lived in convents. They lived sometimes in hermitages. Sometimes they lived literally in a cave somewhere. Sometimes they lived in the caves of the Himalayas, perhaps the caves in Cornwall. We know, of course, the caves of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, right there along the Nile, a spectacular place. A spectacular place. Why? To be alone with the voice of the Creator, to be alone with the voices of all of creation. And for some, that probably seems like a brilliant way to be, simply alone in your own hermitage, in your own temple, your own ashram, your own hole in the wall, in your bedroom, in your den, whatever that happens to be. Way back when, that's how most, I believe, mystics spent a whole lot of their time. I believe in this day and age, we as modern day mystics, those that wish to know and to experience and to be with and to carry with and walk with spirit, find ourselves walking in a day-to-day job, a 9 to 5. I still work full-time here at the Temple Within. My day begins early, and a lot of times my day ends at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I am passionate about my work. And I'm called to be with people. And I'm called to be alone. The modern day mystic needs to have a balance of both. It is okay to be part and parcel of the world. You're right, Nikki. Sometimes it does sound very inviting just to go sit in a cave somewhere in a beautiful saffron robe with some really great incense and some candles and just hanging out with Spirit, hanging out with Creator in a cloistered way. But in this day and age, so many of us are called to be out and amongst and with people. I believe so that the mystery becomes alive. The mystery becomes expressed. If we as modern day mystics are out and about, people know that there's something different. It isn't very often that I go anywhere that people will say to me, there's just something different about you. I don't know what it is, but there's something different about, not necessarily the way that you look, but there's something different about you. What is that? What is it that you know that I don't know? I want to know that. I want to know that. I want to feel that. I want to feel what it is that you feel and experience what it is that you experience. Well, that does require some alone time. Janet is saying she's there in Wales with her beautiful little four-legged. What a little doll. They're alone. I have gone to silent retreat for an entire weekend over in Jackson, Michigan. A beautiful Orthodox convent that is completely silent. Everything is done in silence except for midnight vespers. Boy, there's a mystical tradition, if there ever was one, midnight vespers that are sung in Latin. Oh my goodness. One of the most mystical experiences of my life. Sitting in all of the frankincense and myrrh and listening to these amazing Romanian nuns in Jackson, Michigan, who were quiet all day through every moment of the day, and to listen to them chanting Gregorian chant, Vespers, the prayers of midnight, in Latin and Romanian, and understanding I was the only non-nun in the chapel that evening, so they attempted to sing for me in English. And I remember sitting in the pew. It was a very tiny little chapel for Vespers, the lady chapel, of course. And I remember the nuns wearing their magnificent black wool, their hats and their robes, and them looking at me, and they were so pleased that there was somebody there to enjoy Vespers with them. My friend Marianne was sound asleep the moment that she hit the pew. She was out, but I was thoroughly enthralled in and transported by their songs, by the incense, by the candles, by what was created in that sacred space. And they looked at me, and I remember the tears rolling down my cheeks because they looked at me and they began to sing as best they could in the English language. Breathtaking moment. A group of us. I no longer wear the habit. I no longer wear that. Some would say that I'm a little too holy for their taste. And that's okay. Some would say I'm a little too spiritual for their taste. And that's okay. Some would say that I'm not to their liking at all, and that's okay. Sometimes the mystic is perfumed in something that is so off-putting for others because they don't understand the perfume. They know that it's there, but they can't quite put their finger on it, therefore they can't manipulate it. The mystic has the ability to reside in a place of peace and understanding, in knowing that there is more to this life, to this soul's journey of humanness that we're experiencing. And for some saints, for some mystics, for some human beings, the understanding that this life here on Grandmother Earth is so temporary that even the pain becomes a passion. Even the pain becomes a passion. The passion walk. This time of the year, for Christians, it's Lent time. It's the season of Lent. The Stations of the Cross. Boy, I've been through the Stations of the Cross in so many countries. and in so many varieties of ways. And I came to understand years ago that passion walk is our walk. It represents our walk. Those stained glass windows in the cathedrals and churches, those stained glass windows represent our journey, as well as the journeys of saints and sinners. The mystic understands that. Understands the high highs and the low lows and everything in between, and the passion play of others, and how the passion play of others influences our own passion play. The mystic takes the time to understand that and to be with that. Yeah, it was heavenly. Absolutely was, Janet Smith. It was a heavenly moment. Rob is saying, I'm not sure how many have seen the movie Resurrection with Ellen Burstyn, but the image of her becoming the gray, wild hair old lady in the desert is understandable. Yes. Yeah. The women mystics of the desert. I have a wonderful book about them. About those like John the Baptist who, were walking around in a complete and utter state of passion, or as they say, sacred union. Sacred union with the One. They call them the Desert Mothers. I gave a lecture on the Desert Mothers quite some time ago at an event here in Michigan. The Desert Mothers. The crone, the wise crones. The modern day mystic, the beauty of being a modern day mystic, at least in this track of time, is that we can do our work. We can be the Walmart greeter. We can be the CEO of a corporation. And we can still take the time to nurture our soul and our soul's connection to all things. And one of my favorite saints is Francis of Assisi. Francis really didn't believe in churches and enclosures to worship or to be with creation. In fact, he preferred being outdoors. He preferred actually living in the wild. He spent the last years of his life in Laverna, living in a craggy kind of cave-like existence where people would bring him meals. He didn't eat much. He was a rebel. He preferred to be in nature. Nature nourished him. It's a common theme with saints, and with prophets and mystics and those who became enlightened to the fact that this is a temporary journey, that we're far greater than this experience that our soul has chosen to take. We hear about Siddhartha, who would become the first Buddha, sitting under the tree, the Bodhi tree. We hear about Muhammad being in a cave when the archangel Gabriel appeared. We hear about the interactions that happen with people out in nature, the shamans, the holy men, the holy women of indigenous tribes. I've always been drawn to the Mongolian shamans and their relationships to the horse nation, right? That freedom of the horse, of being around, of being connected to the earth, but also connected to the stars. You see that horse, the head of the horse and the tail of the horse represent our connection to the heavens, to in between, and those four magnificent legs and hooves recognize that we are also connected to earth. The stargazers, Galileo, Bruno, many of whom were punished for their thirst. And, I do believe in reincarnation. I understand that to be true. It's not that I believe it, I understand it to be true. In my lifetime, there have been so many instances of, even for myself, that I no longer posit, could it be true? I know that it's true. And I believe that some of us were those very same mystics of old. And perhaps we carry a little bit of reticence about being a modern day mystic for fear of what will the neighbors think? What will my family think? What will the rabbi think? What will the rabbi think? What will the priest think? What will my parents think? I gave up on worrying about that a long time ago for my own mental health and well-being. I am who I am. I've probably, been the cause of more eyeball rolls for my kids as teenagers growing up than anyone else, because I've also come to understand in my 56 years that most people, 99% of the people that I have met, have a curiosity about what they cannot see, but they know that they can feel. And they have their own way of understanding it. They have their own way of understanding it. And yes, religion is politics, Rob. Religion can be very political. It can be, a dear friend of mine once called religion country clubs. Country clubs, right? There are dues that need to be paid. There are rules to every country club, etc., etc. But for some people, being in a community place of gathering is very soothing. It's very nurturing for some people to be in a community that gathers once a week or twice a week in a place that they feel is sacred. And I honor that. And I will admit that every so often there's nothing like going to a high mass. There's nothing like going to a midnight mass and hearing the songs sung or chanted in Latin. I remember being in Provence, France a couple of years ago, 2014 I guess it was now. And Todd had never been to a silent monastery. And he asked if we could go to Mass. And I said, well, of course, yes, let's go to Mass. And I remember the monks coming in very silently and standing at the front of the church, and they began to chant the entire Mass, Gregorian chant in Latin and then in French. And you could feel the potency of the language, of the French language, of the Latin language, and what it was that they were singing fill the entirety of the church. And knowing that for those monks, there are a lot of rules and regulations clearly that they have to follow, that they've chosen to follow. And I had the freedom, as did Todd, to come in and enjoy the mystery that they created, the mystical presence that they created, and the freedom to leave and to walk away from that back to my life and my interpretation of the experience that I had in that very ancient church with Templar carvings all over the walls. The modern day mystic, I believe, has a heart of compassion that understands that it isn't up to us to save others, but it is perhaps up to us to love them in their time of passion, of their deepest passion in the passion play of their life. There's an understanding that we cannot save others, but we can love them from where we are, because their passion play is their passion play. Their moment in the Garden of Gethsemane is their moment. Our moment in the garden, our moments of crucifixion, our moments of resurrection are our moments. And we are blessed if we have those that love us near and far through our moments. Because we know that in those moments of finding ourselves alone with our personal Judas, our interior Judas, our moments of why have I been forsaken? And all of us have experienced that. And I'm using, of course, what I learned in Catholic lingo. So whether I'm alone in the Hamblecha by myself with spirit, or I'm alone in my own garden at Gethsemane, I know that who I'm going to be is never going to be the same. And there can be pain in letting go of winter. There can be real deep pain in letting go of winter as we embrace spring and what spring brings with it, because what spring brings with it is something that's never been created before. Even the flowers in our garden that bloom every spring may come from the same bulb, but the flower that blooms is not the exact same flower that bloomed the year before. It's not the same flower that shriveled up and died on the vine in the autumn and the winter that just passed. The flower that blooms is different. And what we notice about the crocuses, and I saw the other day some of my irises are starting to pop up in the garden. What I notice about that is how joyful they feel, emerging from winter, having shed whatever blooms there were from last year, and using it as a fertility to grow brand new this spring. And I don't know what those flowers feel in the soil. I know what I've felt in the soil before. Letting go of, shedding, cracking open again to reveal the new. Sometimes we want to remain like that tight bulb, don't we? We just want to remain protected in the soil of comfort. And yet the journey of human life says, listen, mystic, it's time for you to crack open, to blossom, and to be new again, and to understand that it's temporary, because the cycle you see is that it will begin to shrivel again. It will begin to die. It will fade. It will pass. And yet you will be born, or you will be blossomed anew. And you won't be the same you that was last season. And for some people, that brings a sadness that they can never overcome. And for others, it's a sadness of Auld Lang Syne and the anticipation of who am I now? And how does that contribute to who I'm becoming? And how do I wear that? And how do I walk with that wherever I am? Good morning, cousin Donna. That's my cousin. Who am I now? Right? Who am I now that I've met my birth family? Last night I was on the phone for a while with a dear friend, and she said, who are you now? There's something different in your voice, Dana. There's a difference in your energy. And there is. I can feel it. Who am I now? The modern day mystic realizes that everything happens for a reason. And not everything happens to us. I believe everything happens for us. It's how we look at it. We look at it as food for growth or an excuse to wither up and die. I choose to live. I've tried dying a couple of times and it didn't work very well. Oh, goodness. Even our body goes through shifts, right? Our body, as a mystic, long time ago, one of the medicine men up on the reservation said to me, that stroke that you had was spirit preparing you for your walk, your deeper walk with spirit. I said, couldn't they have figured out something easier than a stroke? There's got to be an easier way. And he looked at me and he said, not always. So you need to learn to accept it, and you need to find the gift that was given to you. I said, what gift? I'm still walking with a cane. And he said, you won't always be, but you'll be able to look back and really see the gift that was given to you, the fullness of it, which I had already realized there was a gift to find, but my conversation with him helped to redefine what I was defining as the gift. The modern day mystic always looks for the gift, even the gift to be found in the pain. The gift to be found in the pain. Last night my friend said to me, so Dana, what was it like to meet your father for the very first time, your biological father, and you had to meet him at the cemetery. The only thing that you could touch was his headstone. What was that like for you? And I said, well, it wasn't exactly a Hallmark moment like most people would hope, rushing into the arms of the biological father that's been looking for you forever. But I was embraced by his spirit. Because as I freshened up his headstone area, and I placed a brand new Stars and Stripes for him there, put a brand new flag up for him. He was sitting right there on the lawn, looking at me and smiling. So while I didn't receive a hug from his physical body, he was very present watching me. And I just went down the row and I cleaned off all of the headstones of all of my uncles that are buried alongside my father, all veterans. And I cleaned them all up, and Todd was singing a beautiful honoring song in the Lakota language. And I cleaned them all up, and I said hello to my uncles for the very first time. See, the modern day mystic understands that you can do that. It wasn't a moment of absolute loss that I could not hug my biological father's body. I could embrace his spirit, his soul, and he was embracing mine, as did my uncles. And I spoke to them from my heart to theirs. The modern day mystic knows that you can do that. You don't have to have a physical body present to express love. That's the beauty of it. And maybe to some it looked as though I was kind of mumbling to myself, and maybe it sounded as though Todd was singing in a very low voice, some strange foreign language. But it was a moment of honoring and a moment of intense love. A love that me and my father knew would one day happen, and happen in that way. And that moment, which was agreed upon sometime in the early 1960s, came to fruition. And yes, it was a moment of profound sadness, but a moment of absolute pure joy. And both of those emotions produced tears. Healing tears. And the same thing happened at the gravesite of my mother in Alabama. Discovering that I had a baby brother who died on the day that he was born in 1964. He's buried right alongside her. While I didn't see her, I could feel her peacefulness in that place. That ancient cemetery. I didn't see the spirit of either, but I could feel the spirit of peacefulness that both of them are experiencing where they are now together. That's the mystery for me. That's the mystery revealed for me. That's the mystery in expression for me. And counting the number of eagles and hawks that Todd and I saw. Brilliant. Knowing that the dream that I had of my dad, the Sarge, and him introducing me to my biological father and describing what I saw my biological father in that dream, and being told by my relatives that that's exactly what my father was buried in. Dana, just the way that you described your daddy, that's exactly what he was buried in, darling. That's exactly what he was buried in. Well, I already knew that dream that I had was real, because the mystic understands that dreams tell us something. And sometimes dreams are so profound that we are brought into them. We are brought into that landscape for an experience that our physical experience can never forget. And right now, here in my studio, in my office, I have a portrait of my adoptive father, the Sarge, and my biological father, Billy King, right next to one another. And they're both wearing exactly what I saw them wearing in that dream. I was gifted reproduction photos of my biological father. And so I framed this photo of what of him wearing this uniform, his dress greens. And I found, for the very first time the other day, I was downstairs doing some things, and I found the military portrait of my father, the Sarge, wearing his dress greens. And they're now side by side here in my office, over my shoulder, as they have been all along. The mystic understands that. And that's not to say that the sorrow of death isn't just that. It's sorrowful. Of course it is. And yet there's joy to be found in the knowledge of this ain't all she wrote. And that includes our furry four-legged ones. The other day I was out walking in the enchanted forest, and I found a deer who had passed on up near the fern grotto, as I call it. And I just took a moment, to converse with the spirit of the deer and to thank the spirit of the deer for leaving that beautiful deer energy on the land, the spirit of that deer. And I left, his body at peace and just offered a little tobacco for him giving up his spirit on this land. Because the mystic understands then that the spirit of that deer is now part of the enchanted forest. The spirit of our ancestors are part of who we are. The mystic understands that. Sometimes that one ancestor that speaks through us is perhaps the one and only ancestor of its kind that speaks through us. May not show up in our DNA ancestry because perhaps that ancestor lived long ago, that the technology is not quite there yet to identify it in our DNA. The technology will catch up, but just because the technology hasn't caught up to say these are all 100% of your relatives does not mean that your relatives do not exist in your blood and in your bones and in your soul group, family. The mystic understands that. The mystery versus science as it is available today. The soul knows what the soul knows, and my trip to Georgia proved that over and again. What my soul has always known was and is. It was the others looking at my life and my description of my life that hemmed and hawed and had a problem with what I was describing, what I knew to be true. We mystics know that there's more going on. Good morning, Johnny, my other cousin from down in Florida way, from my mama's side of the kitchen table. We know that we know, and others may not understand, and that's okay. Last night as I was chatting away with my cousin Julie King, we're talking about the need, actually the requirement for boundaries. Because the mystic lives in two worlds simultaneously, a foot in each. A foot in each. Physical and the non-physical world most of the time. Sometimes we dip a little bit more into the spiritual, and sometimes we decide we want to be more on terra firma. But usually there's a balance of both. And when you're walking in two worlds, you're carrying with you both experiences. It's really important to have boundaries. It's really important to let other people walk their journey of healing, walk their journey of understanding. to walk their journey of growth, to walk their journey of the dark night. It's okay to love them from the sidelines, but we cannot do it for ourselves. Trying to parent a parent or perpetually parent a child without letting their soul grow in the way that their soul was intended to grow will kill us. Isn't it amazing? We can look around us and we think, how is that old crank still alive? And everybody who loved and cared for that cranky old cantankerous person is dead and gone. Well, I'll tell you how that happens. Perhaps that cantankerous, cranky old whatever sucked the life and the joy out of everybody who cared for him or her. And he's still wondering what it's all about, because nowhere along the line did anybody let him grow from his mistakes, from what his soul was supposed to learn. Although they typically find themselves very lonely in the old folks' home, and there's a reason for that. And there's growth in coming to understand their aloneness and how that came to be. That's a whole other show now, isn't it? But the mystic can understand that we need to let our children grow. There's this new term called snowplow parents, right? Snowplow parents that just have to plow every obstacle out of their child's way. Every financial burden, every mental, emotional burden, plow it out of the way so they don't have to experience hardship. Well, they also don't experience life. They don't experience growth. At least that's what I believe. But then again, I raised, well, it's with the exception of Colton, who came back and lived with me till he was 23. Elise and Dane were both out of the house by 19. Elise at 18, she's like, here's my hat. Yes, I am in a hurry. Bye, Mom. It's been great. See ya. Dane, it took him a little bit longer. He was 19. Yeah, bye, Mom. I'm off on my own. And Colton had gone as well, but then he came back for a little bit. And I'll tell you, he was 23. And I remember standing in the upper level of my home and watching him drive away. And I stood there by myself, the single mom, truly with an empty nest. And I remember just crying, watching him pull away in his old blue jalopy. And I remember in that moment a voice speaking to me saying, Dana, you did the best that you could for them. Now it's their turn. And you can love them and you can help them as it's needed. But now it's their turn. And we have great conversations now, all of them being adults, about those days when it was me and all of them. And the horses and the dogs and their friends. The mystic understands that everybody needs to grow. That's why we came here. That's why we came here. It's an extraordinary privilege to live a human lifetime. As that magnificent Lakota elder shared with all of us up at Arval Looking Horse's place a few years back. If you wanted to be so holy, you should have stayed in spirit. We came here to be human and experience being human. We have to experience it all, he said. You can walk with spirit. That doesn't mean that you have to be so holy you don't have joy. Do you know how many spirits wish that they could come here and have our human journey? Laugh. Don't take it so seriously. Don't take it so seriously. Boy, here in the West, humor sometimes I think is looked at as a weakness. I like humor. I like humorous people. I'm very blessed because the cousins that I met a couple of weeks ago in Georgia are the funniest group of human beings I've ever encountered in all of my life, without exception. I mean, they would make Medea blush. They are so funny and joyful. And that doesn't mean to say that they haven't had pain, because they've had their more than fair share of it. The joyful mystic is a beautiful way of being, not to be so serious about everything. not to be so serious about saving others, doing it for them. There are a lot of people who are a case of arrested development, I think. And it's not always their fault. Arrested spiritual development, arrested soul development, arrested social development. You know what I'm saying. I guess I was kind of like on a roll there. Hey, Juliet. Yeah, Janet saying her son is still with her at 24. Yeah. Oh, my kids couldn't wait to get out the door. See ya. So when Dane had to move in for about 6 weeks while his new house was being, all the processing and the finance of all of that, he needed a good place to stay. So he decided to come out here into the Enchanted Forest with me and Todd. And he said, oh, this is really great. Here I am, 29 years old and living with my mom. And I said, I'm really happy about this, son, because I raised a really great adult, and I'm going to miss you when you're gone. So I'm glad that you needed a place to land for a few weeks while your house was being finalized. And I appreciated the fact that at 29, he's wonderful to talk to and to visit with. And whatever his decision was to move out at 19 and everything he's experienced in these 10 years, some really high highs and some really low lows. Losing his father, losing his grandfather, losing his other grandmother, losing relationship. Having a conversation with him and being thankful that our souls agreed that we would have this interaction in this lifetime. That's a soul agreement, I believe. What a precious agreement. Somebody said to me the other day, Dana, do you realize the odds of, as an adopted person, your biological family finding you and reaching out to you? I said, I know, isn't it marvelous? It's magical. It's wonderful. There are no words to describe. It's mystical. It's wondrous. And I believe that somewhere along the line, all of us cousins, those of you that are listening, because I know that you are, somewhere along the line, all of us cousins decided there was going to come a day in the year 2018 and then forward into 2019 where we would all be brought together again. Our souls know one another. Many of us look just like one another. It's the obvious on the outside, but our souls agreed there would come a day. I believe the same thing happens with friendships. The souls of our friends would say, hey, one day you and Janet and Juliet are going to meet one another for really real in Wales. Wales? Yes, Wales. You're going to go to Wales and you won't know it at the time, Dana. But what you're going to find out is that you're Welsh. And you're Scottish. And you're not going to know that before you go. But when you get there, your soul is going to feel like it's come home. Something within your soul or someone within your soul. And Dana, when you go to the Badlands for the very first time, out in South Dakota, and you go to ceremony for the very first time, you're going to feel like you went home. But you're not going to know at that time that your Grandpa King was Scottish and English and Cherokee. And you're not going to know at that time that your Grandma King was Creek or Seminole and Irish. You're not going to know that. But somewhere in your blood and in your bones, those American Indian relatives are going to say, oh, we're home. We're living within you, Dana. Thank you for bringing us home to ceremony. And those African relatives of yours that are in your bloodstream, the first time you go to Egypt and the second time you go to Egypt, and when you travel to Nubia, those relatives in your blood and in your bones are going to say, Dana, thank you for bringing us home to Africa. Thank you. And when you and Todd get married in Cornwall in 2012, your Cornish relatives are going to say thank you for bringing us home in your blood and in your bones and in your ancestral memories. And in 2019, when you and Todd go through a hand fasting in Ireland, now I know my Granny King's going to be right there when Todd and I have hand fasting ceremony with Amantha in Ireland this September. I know she's going to be right there. And I know that all of Granny King's relatives that reside in my blood and my bones are going to be right there with me. And when Todd and I find our way to the Netherlands, because we will, I know we will. We've already talked about it. When we're in Denmark and Rotterdam and Norway, I know that my grandma and my grandpa Erfman, my grandma and grandpa Eckert, and all of those relatives that live in my blood and my bones are going to say, Dana, thank you for bringing us home to the ocean, to the old country, to the land of Van Gogh, to the land of the Dutch masters, of the Northmen and the North women, the land of Odin, Woden. Thank you for bringing us home. The modern day mystic understands that we don't travel alone. We travel with those who are in our blood and in our bones, not necessarily in modern day DNA testing, because the testing hasn't yet evolved into what our soul already knows to be true. Somebody asked me, are you going to become tribally enrolled now? And I said, no, I don't feel a need to be tribally enrolled. Unless I want to enroll in a variety of countries. No, I don't feel the need for that. I know who I am. The mystic knows who they are. They know who they walk with, in the seen and the unseen, that none of it is by coincidence, none of it is by chance, and it is the most splendid experience that a soul can have, to be here present on Grandmother Earth, with the ecstasy and the agony and the joy to be found in both and in between. Isn't that marvelous? With that, everyone, thank you for being present with me in this lifetime. Thank you for helping me to understand the mystery, because you are the mystery incarnate. You are the mystery in expression. You bring me joy. You bring me learning. You bring to me knowledge. You bring to me your wisdom, that if I'm lucky and blessed enough, one day may become my wisdom. And always you gift me with your light. And with that, everyone, thank you for being with me. Have a beautiful day. Welcome to spring. Welcome to all things new. Blessings be, everyone.